말에 당도 나 동아세야다 땡기 대화 탑이야 맞아 동아용이고 그 녀모바디 안에 자원에 매와서 이제 방야기 방발을 양은 저게 방고월 와당을 쳐서 지산자 땡기 대화 된 것도 토고월에 안에 동아세야다 자원에 매바 동아 규리 매와서 고월 와서디 고월 와다 이 고와 인자 다디 탑람 가네시네 매와서 그리 세대 먼저 삼류톤에 삼류규와 땅위톤에 곰베도네 삼로 곰시 땅제 삼류 곰녀 교화다요 되네나 어디 안에 직 땡기 되어 토비하다 한 동하여야 그 규단 잡아 매버서요 가디 도시는 삼로 곰베 답게네 교화 땅고 그래 사실 순고로 와다 탑람들라.
Good evening. So in order to achieve our desired state, a state that is freed from all suffering and problems, a state where we experience only lasting, stable happiness, we need to, on the one hand, cultivate the causes that will lead to happiness, and together with that, eradicate the causes that would otherwise lead to suffering. And the method for doing so is, in brief, to change our way of thinking, particularly to change our habitual way of thinking. So our habitual way of thinking is in the line of virtue, or is in accordance with virtue, and not ever in accordance with non-virtue. This is how one changes one's mind in order to attain a state of lasting happiness.
그래서 나가는 저기 지금이다 돈으로나 수도수에 나가서 지게 내가 지구로 받아 제대 가리 돈다 지구로서는 동아세나 디기루에 돈다 짠짠 제대로 와 이나야 지기디나 지구로 때 끼네 마시 봐도 지금 내가 디기루에 동아세에 돈다 디기용에 돈다 지구로 때 이내 동아세에 싸우기네 매바 쇠마토 왔다 디기세에 균튀네 된자용 마토바디 먼저 세부하고 그러바지 디리도 기부에나 산이도와 강하다 지 리버림발야 지게 강하세에 지 최선을 맞서다 말아 영어 되게 직체 디기로다 뜻뜻 용베나 남사 지 유어도 되게 진짜 띵이 두대 지상한테 디기 두요를 동아세에게 탑을 내가지 지고 때 디제라 내가도 따다지 신구 두고 말해서 디기 탑을 따다 야고 차 뿌이다고 채고 말해서 지상 디뿌이다고 차야 돼 가는 차고라서 낭삼로 돈에 삼로 난바 지게 동아용에게 삼로 가는 코나 근데 동아용도 삼로 가는 코나 동아용 민도스 배 삼로데 바 삼로디 근데 야와체 하고 뭐신 바지 되네 하고네 되는 아주 삼로디 다 디기 용에게 삼로디 꼭 하고도 디 무주제네 야 디장냐 삼다 현다 삼마다제 지 동아용에게 삼로디 기네 마다지 용마제 까지 디기 용에게 삼로 디장냐 삼다지 근데 지 냠네 저고 그래서 디바지 되는 제바에는 아주 띵기 대화다 아니 동아세야디 자오기 매바도 투구리에서 비기다 너 삼로 장고 삼로 돈을 롭정시제 디 장고리에서 되는 근데 낭주에 나눠줘 당가 디기루에게 탑람디 삼로교와 당당 곰냠는 지고래서 저디 송고로 와다
All of us here, in fact, all human beings are not only human beings, but all living beings, so humans, animals, unseen beings. We all long for happiness. Happiness is a state completely freed of suffering, problems, and difficulties. And in order to both achieve happiness and to overcome problems, we engage in a wide variety of activities, whether it's with our family or at a place of work or activities for relaxation. But our lives are full of activities, one after the other. And we engage in all of these with the same motivation, to experience happiness and to overcome problems and difficulties. Yet when we look at our life and those whom we know, the state is yet to be achieved. No matter what activities, what lifestyle one engages in, when we recognize that a state of lasting happiness is yet to be achieved. And we know, though, that sometimes we do go through periods when our life is going a bit better, or maybe we're in one right now, but we also know, despite our best hopes, this will pass. And then once again, unwanted problems and difficulties will befall us. And all too often, this change can come about very quickly. We're going about, minding our own business, we're in quite a relaxed state of mind, and then suddenly something happens, and it all changes. From this we can see, through repeated experience, that whatever activities we engage in, they never result in lasting happiness. But this does not mean that we are without hope, that there is nothing that can be done. Buddhism presents a method whereby lasting happiness can be achieved. And this, in brief, is to transform our way of thinking, taking control of our own mind, developing new habitual ways of thinking, and breaking harmful habitual patterns. The way to do this is through gathering knowledge and applying that knowledge, applying it both in meditation and throughout our day. And to express this in its briefest form, to be mindful of our mental activity at all times, ensuring that our mental activity is in accordance with wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking, and as soon as we notice it going in an unwholesome or non-virtuous direction, we immediately counteract it and bring it back to a wholesome, virtuous way of thinking. This is what we need to do. This is the actual meaning of Buddhist practice, taking control of our mind, taking responsibility for our own mind, and ensuring that it's always in a direction that is wholesome and virtuous.
Karela nga jugi ta sam dusta bene nga ju lega karela chebene dambo samlo chita che samlo digi kuno chi kheche ni di jego de kala sabe bene dambo kuno de ni di sawo sebe kuno chi kheche kuno digi jesu da je kala zago ba di na shen ga ju jige lega ro kare chebene 직 dambo kuno nge di jego sebe kuno samlo kuno chi ke kuno digi kin che ne ana ju lega dil pa ju che lega di jigo ba 제상 안 주기 지금 총례 제배나다 안지게 잡된 레가로 제배나 가르 제모를 레가 가르 제배나 당보 군노랑 디식인 선배 삼로 군노디 가제 숙체 그기 철에 숙체 삼로 군노디 숙체에나 안지 레가데 디철파 조 레가 조 디철파 제루로 봐다 숙체 제루로 봐 제상 낭 삼로기 숙긴이 토네 만지 류가 류다 나기 자와디 nang samlo ge shukin ka che shukche ka holo shukche na di shukin thone ane ji le ge ji ba di ma zo se wu ro da ga zo ji ge sam da ba da.
As we start to take responsibility for our mind, become aware of our mental process, we'll recognize that before we engage in any activity, there is thought process. There is a cultivation of an intention before we engage in any physical or even verbal activity. This is often not something we are cognizant of, but as one becomes more aware of our mental processes, we become aware that there is a motivation or an intention preceding speech, preceding activity. For example, the thought will come, do I want to eat supper tonight? And thereafter, if the thought is I do, then the thought will be, what shall I eat? And then we'll have go through a various thoughts, what do I have, what shall I eat? And we make a decision, and then we engage in preparing our meal. So there is, before each activity, there is an intention. And the quality and the strength of that intention or motivation is what determines what activity we engage in or don't engage in, as well as whether we engage in something half-heartedly or with full commitment. And this, through becoming more mindful of our mental process, we'll recognize precedes every physical and mental activity. And even if we're caught up in a chain of thoughts, these too have an underlying intention that starts this chain of thoughts and keeps it going.
Denigre, no answer Yaja some the stabina, Jinga Zugli, Ganga Rochi Pe, Ganga Shu, Chedu Kapla, 다 강아지 매와 소에게 탑람이야. 당가 강아지 최고도 강아지 간에서 매와 소에게 나서비게 탑람 제제. 다디 직 강아지에 된다래 안등이 직 창시동에서 비 창동에 안직 창동에 강아지에 된다. 당보 강아지에게 세고도 선병이 강아 용구도 강아지 통. 다 강아지 파 매와 소고는 알아 이 기고 강아지 매와 소고도 선병이 디 강아 매와 소되게 삼로 군노지케. 다 강아지 매와 소에 탑람 가르들었으네. 나고 제 고랑 탑람 약속이 창동에 통제 제 창동에다. 안직 디나신 안 지면서야. 아니 지금 야지 강한 세에 돈달라 된 지금 투부자야. 대소셔도 재산 꾸노디게 먼저 지면서야다 창동야다. 다디니게 삼다도네 소소 강한테 세우도 선배 꾸노지 키에제 삼로 디토네 나게 강한테 가는 세와 탑람 가는 세워서 탑람 디레셔서 탑람 디토지 코디비지 된 거로와 이내양 디 탑람 디게 강한 세에 탑람 약보도 차고 말봐 당서. 나 디니게 삼다베는 안 저게 탑람 디게 삼다야디 낭 삼로치기 긴제네 대지게 강아세에게 창동야래 시면사야래 시한려 투부자래 시한을 소주야래 차사디 아니 고마고야래 차사 삼모데 강아지 세고도 선비게 강아세고 탑을 디 탑람디 디가르도슨 디레샤 선비게 삼로 탑람지다 디 베지 당거로다 차사 디 베지다 차사 당아도 두치네 삼다나 고마고 한래 미스게네 안지고 지 투부자가래 아니 지금 담아 탱에를 지면서 차선 강아세게 된다라 당부군원 되는 시키지 삼로 지키 삼로 디기 베지 휴긴 돈에 다 자와디기 지고로 받아서 제가 되네 삼다번 디소 라바라방 삼다번 자와치 차선 당부 간스 질리우스는 유 난게 삼로 돈에 연구 여바데 세부를 자고 두고도 하다서
As soon as one identifies a problem in one's life or a difficulty in one's life or some suffering that one is experiencing, one immediately thinks, what can I do about this? Thereafter, one goes through various options. Will this work? Will that work? Devising a plan of action and then deciding, okay, this is what seems like the best method. I will now embark. I will engage with this. So this is how we go about our life continuously, once with small things and big things. So let's say we've come home from work, we may be a bit frustrated, a bit annoyed. What can I do? We're experiencing suffering. And we immediately think, what can I do? Maybe I'll have a drink. Maybe I'll take some recreational drugs. And then one does so. So here, what I'm encouraging you to look within yourself is to see that before an activity comes a thought process. So one comes home from work a little stressed, a little tense, and then thinks, I'll have a drink. You recognize there's a problem, come up with a method, a solution, and then you engage in it. So there's these various steps of intention. One, looking to solve, having identified a problem, then secondly, looking to solve the problem, and then engaging in the solution. Or maybe, but often this isn't so clearly thought out. You may come home from work a little tense. Your partner says something to you, no, I think something quite bland, but your response is quite exaggerated. So here, what has gone on subconsciously is something that has been said, has been received in a particular way, and wanting to eradicate a particular situation, one responds in a harsh manner. So on the subconscious level, there's a thinking of, this is unwanted. I want to remove this situation. What has been expressed to me, I want to eradicate that. I want to eradicate that so I don't have to experience what's arising in me. And then one responds in a harsh manner. So this is how we go throughout our life. There's this intention that leads to looking for solutions, that then leads to further intention, and we engage in activity. But when we look over the course of both our lives and what we observe elsewhere, we see that never really works out that well. All too often, it just exacerbates the problems we are experiencing, or if the technique is more skillful and does ease our situation, it's only temporary. So here the key points I want you to look for is to see how at each step there's your underlying thought process leading to an intention to seek a solution. Firstly, an intention to identify the problem. Secondly, to seek a solution. Thirdly, to implement the solution. Then the second area to look at is how this never leads to lasting happiness, a lasting eradication of problems so that they never arise again. So all the methods that we come up with trying to change our world doesn't lead to the desired result of lasting happiness.
차상 삼로 천직비 삼로 제바제 삼로 야기나 디지네 가르디 디지네 가려서 파 제바제 삼로 파 삼로 당기는 삼로의 야기 시우 친체 내수디 세보 시우지 하고 안델야 디지네 디용사 디고네 디지 섭사를 세비게 삼로의 야기 시우 조데 되는 남조서야다 디 삼로 디기 하고 야기시 삼로 디 견진네 되는 지게 남조서야라서 받아 되니게 엔지 주선서야라서 받 되네서네 엔지 네 네바세야게 네 내래 팬비게 면죄지야다 차서도 제 되니게 삼로 야기 침비 토네 야기 친 디토네다 제조다 오보다 차선 줍지네 나들이야 강아세에 팬도디 망고시우지 대시 삼로 나려서 강아세디 타마테나 안에 지게 창동야 디게 탑람 디통아디레 다디디 탑람의 약효 당하는 저 랑치부 마이바 맞아 미망볼에 판도야기 강아세야다 디기주야래 판도야게 삼로디 다디디 천직비게 삼로 야게 토비 도네 남주서야다 매서야다 안에 지기 되네게 서야기 니수도 하고 삼로디 슈경기 경기제네 맞아 맨수야데 남주서야 되는지도 판도 침부 시작으로 지상 디 탑람 하고 해야지 삼로디기 탑람 약하진 얘기도 와 니제 라신 만도 차상리야 강아세 투야기 베드치 투도 와 지상 디수 차상 만도 삼로 이야기 줘 봤던 삼로디는 용도 와 됐어.
The illustrations I just mentioned, I'm confident you'll clearly recognize that within your own lives, your own lived experience. And this is also the experience throughout society, and not just on the immediate individual level, but also on a greater, more macro level. For example, if we think of all the technology that we make use of, whether it is electronics or some of the incredible machinery that has been developed, or in the fields of medicine, all these initial inventions and developments over centuries have come about through the same process. Someone identified a problem. That to identify a problem requires a thought process. That thought process, having identified a problem, expands and solutions are sought. In that process of seeking solutions, the individual would look at what other technology is available, what other inventions there are, and see what they can build upon. And in this way, they come to a solution. They think, in this way we can solve a problem. And then there's further mental process about implementing the solution that they've come up with. In this way, the technology in our world, whether it's on the side of manufacturing, so say forms of transport, or the more modern forms of technology, or to do with medicine, all of this have come about independent on the thought process associated first with identifying a problem, secondly, broadly looking for solutions, seeing what's available and how this is there something existing that can solve this problem, or how can I develop something new, and then thirdly, implementing those solutions. So this is something that goes on throughout society and has been continuously since time immemorial. This way, we look to try and find solutions to our problems, to our difficulties in life, to try and ease our burden of suffering.
직 당보 삼로 디기 지수 안 되니기 자와 체제 안 지금 연구해 봐디 먼저 세부하고 걸어 봐다디 먼저 통수스게 봐 예대로 봐 어디 나시 다 가르쳐 버렸으나 먼저 깨워치마 하다 미고 봐 고구에나 삼로 갔던 거래지 한 삼로 다음에 삼로시다 삼로 토는 깨워치마 하다 미고 톱고도 선배게 디 삼로 돈이 슉첨부 지어 봐나 디기 기엔체네 근데 깨워치 말하다 미고 토액이 규디 쌓아도 인계단 깨워치 말하다 미고 톱톱이 해세 제사디 차다 미고 토익이 아니 안저기 둥하디 파매바 차르고 용하여 말와 용하여 야외 이다다 둥하이 용하여 말와 어디 나신다 딜에 자와다 띵기 둥하서 자원에 뭐 띵기 대화된 용하디 타르바세 톱라야 안 삼로 가르 땅보 삼로 가르시 동그랬으네 제사당이 탈바세에 코에 누가 타달로 탈바세 토구도 삼비게 삼로 군노 디슈치 뭐 고고 그래지 디군노 디슈치 뭐 주게디나 디 점만 많이 봐 슈치 뭐 용기나 니기 gen제네 타바토에게 자화 배주 가르치요는 탑람을 쪄용 그래서 뒷점바에는 탈바 톱투 그래지 어디 나신다 다스 띵기 대와 타 초도 주바 상지 고방 토발래야 당보 삼로 가르고 와서 셈전 탐지기 산여 고방 토벌치기 세비 삼로 디 고고레스 다 삼로 디 안에 직접만 많이 슉침부 줘봐 있나 니기 gen제나 산여 고방 토비 탑라는 배주치기레스 디 제와도 한 산여 고방 토병 그래 제난 탐제 다 군노 삼바텔라 라리고 제사데 산여 고방 토기 지긴 셈배 삼로다 코에 둥알라 타고도 셈배 삼로 깨와치 말하다 미 토고도 셈배 삼로 대소 삼로 지를 같이 축체에나 디 가르를 슉체나 디 토백에 탑는 베즈지 용 그래서 디 베즈지나 내란 제부디 토용 그래서 규사고래 규사바자 제부 토고래 사지 다 되는 인상 저기 제가 삼로 교화다디 되니게 돈에게 삼로 된 아주 슉치 뭐 저기 베시 가서 수 예매나 깨바디게 안에 슉치 뭐야 곰제 베지 곰제 권에 권도 다야디 베지 슉치 뭐 줘야디 깨치 뭐래스 근데 디슨 거를 당하죠.
So through these previous segments, what I hope you're recognizing clearly for yourselves is this thought process. First, the thought process that identifies a problem. Secondly, that then seeks out solutions, and having settled on one that one sees as best, then implementing that solution, trying to achieve the desired result. So now to take it from the illustrations I've given, which is about our everyday life, and to bring it to the specific spiritual context. So when one thinks about this rebirth that we've achieved as a human being, thinks about what will happen when the time of death comes, and the possibilities of where rebirth may well be taken, to the extent that one thinks about this deeply, a determination, independence on that thought will arise. I must achieve a good rebirth in my future lives, just like I have in this life. And if the level of the depth or profundity, the level of profundity that one thinks about this topic is nothing more than I've just expressed here, then the intention will arise and it will pass. But if one thinks about it again and again, so that one's way of thinking is transformed, and now habitually one is thinking about accumulating the causes that will lead to good rebirths, that's what one will do. This will be at the forefront of one's mind. And that is the indispensable foundation to think even more deeply about one's situation, recognizing that even if my rebirth after this, I close the possibility on falling into the lower realms, and again, like in this life, achieve a good rebirth, I know from my lived experience now, I will still encounter suffering and problems. Not as great as being in the lower realms, but still far more than I want to endure. In fact, everywhere that every rebirth, as long as it's one bound in samsara, suffering will follow. So here now, one's train of thought is being built on further from one's previous thinking, which is, I must achieve a good rebirth. Now one is thinking even more deeply, recognizing that actually I need to gain freedom from this process of uncontrolled rebirth in its entirety. I have to attain liberation from the sufferings of samsara in their entirety. And to the extent that one thinks about this deeply, again and again, a way of thinking will arise called uncontrived definite emergence, where one will strive day and night to accumulate the causes that will lead to liberation. So this then is a second and deeper level of transforming our way of thinking, so that when we go about our daily activities, our mind is focused not on the mundane problems and difficulties, but rather transcending that and ensuring we're accumulating the causes for liberation. And that second level is the indispensable foundation to then think deeper still, recognizing that in the same way that I'm trapped in the suffering realms of samsara, but long for freedom, so too do all sentient beings. All sentient beings who are bound in samsara find themselves experiencing unwanted situations again and again. And all of them, just like me, long for freedom, a state of peace, lasting, stable peace. But they, like I am now, are bound in confusion. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable that I strive for my own liberation alone and don't help others. In fact, their attainment of liberation from suffering is my responsibility. I cannot ignore them. And to be able to be the most effective of guide, to be of greatest benefit to others, I have to become a Buddha for their sake. So therefore, I will strive for enlightenment. And this is where one generates uncontrived bodhicitta. So here, we're taking this general understanding that I mentioned before, that first one identifies a problem, so this is from a way of thinking, then one seeks out solutions and then implements the solutions. Now bring it to this context here. We take that same way of thinking and independence on first developing a determination for good rebirth, we can then develop a determination for liberation from suffering in its entirety, and thereafter for Buddhahood. All these deeper ways of thinking come about one independence on the other. But what they all come down to is this: transforming our way of thinking. In particular, habituating ourselves to a particular way of thinking and thereby breaking our habituation to another way of thinking. This then is how one transforms one's mind.
다 약쇼데 그거리에서는 심지어 탐적이도나 상요고방 토발지기 인습에 삼노들이 지산디 약쇼디 인자 만두디 약쇼디 디베시 당고레 지산 심지어 탐적이 상요고방 토발지기 인습에게 다 데니기 좀 많이 버지게 봐나 데니 좀 많이 버들라 자주 셈나 고레 다디 군노나네 약쇼디레스 지산당도 디군노디 만주기라 마케바게 버체제 깨와 고안내고도 폐하게 탑람비고레스 제디 디송고를 당하죠.
There are four levels of motivation. The one that dominates almost every being is thinking about achieving happiness, pleasurable circumstances in this life, and overcoming the problems and difficulties of this life. So for most people, what dominates their mind is the problems that are being experienced in this life or may be experienced in this life, as well as the pleasures they are experiencing or may experience in this life. A deeper motivation is transcending that, seeing this as something that this life is coming to an end. I should rather be focusing on achieving the causes that will lead to a good rebirth. And thereby, one's mind is not dominated by the problems and difficulties of this life, because one is rather focused on achieving a good rebirth. But a deeper motivation, still a third level, is where one sees that even attaining a good rebirth, whilst essential, that alone is insufficient. I need to gain freedom, liberation from uncontrolled rebirth itself. I need to gain freedom from the bounds of samsara. This then is a far deeper motivation, where everything one does is directed towards achieving those causes that will lead to liberation. That's the third. And then the fourth, the supreme level, is where one is determined to become a Buddha for the sake of others. Where everything that one does is focused on achieving enlightenment for the sake of others. So, let alone the problems and difficulties of this life won't have much impact on one, nor the pleasures of this life, because one is thinking so much further than that. All that is important is accumulating causes that will lead to the attainment of enlightenment, so that I can help all others achieve enlightenment too. And when one has thought about this again and again, so that it arises in a way that it doesn't require any intention, it spontaneously, naturally arises, it's called uncontrived bodhicitta, the determination to become enlightened for the sake of others. And it arises in a way that is not contrived, doesn't need to be generated. This then is the supreme motivation of the four levels, merely looking for happiness in this life, or a good rebirth, or liberation from samsara. It's enlightenment, the fourth level, that is supreme. So this then is what we should strive to cultivate, and to whatever level we have cultivated it, strengthen it ever further.
Tsedelia digi drube tablam rochi kulon ti yobaina tsedelia digi drube dunga seyagi tablam rochi tugure mado kewa chimal hada mi ko ban thoye tablam le bezuchun yagi kulon digi shukin je tugo mare ta kewa chimal hada mi ko ban zam thobna digidu usme de thogudu sambe kulon digi kewa chimal hada mi ko ban thoye tablam le bezu jegi nubatten tugure mado ne tarba thoye ko ban thoye an tablam 고미알이야 비즈젤의 니버튼 두고마 아단 디나신다 탈방한 고비 동안을 접에 탈바점 톱네 디기도 셈베 꼴로디기 탈바점 톱에기 유견사야리아 안 주튕견 주기알이야 니버튼 두고레마도 사제 고방 토야리아 니버튼 두고마래 다 셈전 탐지기도나 사제 고방 토고도 셈베 꼴로 장슈 셈지 고바이나 디기 꼴로 디기 슈긴디 세델에 디기 유야기 니버 tablam tuk tukore, jawa chimal hada mi go bang thoyagi, gyujina tablam tin tukore, ane dunga tamjeda pangbe tarba, kobe dunga tadalo dribige drawa diyan, pangba diyan thoyagi, tablam dekasa di tablam druyagi tunye nuba tun tukore, ane sanje go bang tun nimombo bacha de jeba bang, sanje go bang tube tablam nuba tun tukore. Jeza janju sem di 차상기 대시 맞아 미유시나데 차상 주비에게 유진 사투에게 누버 차상 디기 된투 누버 된거 된투고 대제 전다디기 아니 디 차상 누버 된 레레 소소라레 마도 전다 누버 된 두고 말아 진짜 자주쌤 공부 있나 진짜 자주쌤 디나리 공론의 초도 교발해서 해야지 자주쌤 공부 있나 디기 깨와 디기 주비에 누버 된 두고래 केवा छिमाल हादा मियो को बा थोबे के थबला में बेजु निबत तु करे कोवे दुंगा थादा ले जेबि के पंगबा ता दिगि जुबे दे निबत तु करे सांजे को बा थबे को बा थबे कि थबला में निबत तु करे देजा जाजे सेम दे दिनि को कुलना ने 약쇼 तिरे साच दिसुंगदा 임베 김찬데다 지산 타바도 그 전주심 공부 있는 녀모 방도 그래 녀모 방도 녀모 사번나 제바 방배 방바 두고 와 아니 타바도 기도 버려나 데니 타바도 기도 데니 디미도 숨 두고로 봐 디디 두고로 봐 라담 깨와치네 지기 세디에디 용구래디 니게 용구라디 디디.
So why is it then that it's said that bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, is the supreme motivation? Well, we have the four. The motivation to achieve happiness just in this life, where one isn't even thinking in one's activities about achieving causes for happiness in future lives, one is just engaging in cultivation of causes for happiness now. And then there's a second level, where one is focused on achieving the happiness of our next life. The third level, where one's striving for liberation from samsara in its entirety. And the fourth, which is now said to be supreme, that of striving for enlightenment. Well, the reason why striving for enlightenment is supreme is because the preceding three levels, only those causes that one accumulates, in other words, the activities one engages in, those activities one engages in is the cultivation of causes that will lead to happiness, but only in so far as one's motivation directs them. So if one is motivated, is not just thinking about overcoming problems now so that one's life is a little easier, then what one engages in to achieve that, those causes only have the strength to achieve that one goal, a bit of happiness now. Or if one's motivation is stronger and one is engaging in similar causes but wishing to achieve happiness through a good rebirth in our next life, we will achieve some happiness now in this life and a good rebirth in our next life, but it won't go further than that. And if our motivation, though, is much deeper, and one is sincere about attaining freedom from samsara in its entirety, liberation, then those activities, those causes one accumulates, will achieve the results, but only up to liberation. And then that cause has fulfilled its potential. Its potential will be exhausted. So that's for the first three levels of motivation. The strength of the motivation is only sufficient for the causes to lead to that result and lead to happiness until that result comes, but only up to there. Enlightenment, where the attainment of enlightenment is one's sincere motivation, then everything one does, all the activities one engages in, will lead to happiness being experienced in this life, will lead to good rebirths in our next life, will lead to the attainment of liberation from samsara, in that the afflictions together with their seeds will be abandoned, and the same causes will continue to have strength or potency until their goal of enlightenment has been achieved. So therefore, enlightenment is the supreme goal, is the supreme motivation, because all the causes that are accumulated with the motivation of enlightenment, those causes will continue to have energy and strength until the motivation is fulfilled, until enlightenment is achieved.
Semjan tam jigi dune sanjo kupang topar sho, jigi yin sebi topar sho, sembe samlo, joma mayin ba jik keba ina da di janshu sem chagoro, joma mayin ba. Jisa da nganzo kisin su janshu sem ki penyon sede, janshu sem bi ki penyon sungore, da janshu ki liu tangbo penyon sungore. Jisa penyon sede, janshu sem bi ki kiechu, janshu sem di ki kiechu ma son, yunden dende yore, nuba dende yore se ajik sungore, kiechu sene, penyon sene, kiechu sene dirwa. Jisa di yin za, kasa nganzo di nye le, xie de le ya, and this Sergio Zilia, Beja, and Jajusemki, Nuba, Jajusemki, Nuba in the shore, etc. And Dinashin, Tongbungi, Debon, Tongbo in the Becha, and Denica Channel, Chasana Ponto to the Nuba in the shore, etc. to kissing the Dinelia, she did in the Shurwada.
And there are some different ways to divide bodhicitta, but what is actually classified as bodhicitta is this mind of uncontrived bodhicitta, where the determination to attain enlightenment for the sake of others, one has developed such habituation to this intention that it spontaneously arises. It doesn't need to be intentionally generated. So that uncontrived bodhicitta is what is meant by bodhicitta. Now in our text, we're in the first chapter, which outlines the benefits of bodhicitta, and thus far we've looked at 6 of them, of which 2 we looked at last week. So we looked at the benefits where we came to the section where the benefits by way of illustration are presented. An examples last week was bodhicitta being likened to an elixir that could transform a smaller amount of metal or iron could be transformed into a large amount of gold. In the same way, a virtue can be transformed into the supreme result of enlightenment. So that was the 10th verse we looked at last week, and the 11th verse was the illustration was of a captain guiding other merchants to achieve their desired goal. So this then was the second of the illustrations that we've looked at, showing the benefits of bodhicitta.
lama chupa na la chojin she de sing chi ki do adi basam sing se basam se do go ba ga ba bo sama sam basam chore do ba ga ba sa yu na men pe yu ba ne sama sam le bo sama sam basam yi sing se that's it. Oh yeah.
So tonight we come to the 12th verse in the chapter, and this is an illustration of utilizing a banana or plantain tree, as well as that of, and I really forget what it's called. Maybe it's it's the same tree that is utilized in the merit field. So maybe we could just call it a wish-fulfilling tree. I can't remember if it's called something else, but we'll go for a wish-fulfilling tree then, and a banana tree.
That's it in Madire. Gawa Shangun Chushin Shinduni, Jebu Kin, Saber Guani, Janchu Sim Junshin, and Tapara Yang, and Jebu Jimbe, Missy Peror Gurus.
The 12th verse. All other virtues, just like a banana tree, simply perish upon bearing fruit. The fruit tree of bodhicitta will, however, forever flourish, bearing fruit inexhaustibly.
Now, one bit ma Shana, Gawashan, the Chushin said, and the Chushin said that it Chishin share. The Digarson, Diba, Shin Dipa, Suki, the Shin Korongi, Nimboros Karasne, to Yaki, then the Metosha, Jewish Darwa. Jewo Dasan and Sarjik Dasan, then the Jewanga Dio Maris, Shin Della, Shin Dagara, Jewanga Dio Maris, Chisan Shin Dipa, Yanga, and the Shin Sabas Gish, Danmato, Corona, Jewo Sarjik Dasana, Yanga Dio Maris, Chushin said, the Sigore. The Basam Yishin said, then I did that Basam Yishin said, that Delia, Jewo, and Medoda, Gitina Chikiyama, Zoakuni meeting at your as or that. The Zoakuni meeting. That answered the Basam Shin, the Shin Papa Shesha, but now to give arm Shin Rosine, go arm Shizikis and go Lomang relative Daigua, Sarjikema, Dalo, Dailojimata, go Shindi, Yanga Jemo, Yanga Sabakemo, Shin Dagarala. Jebu Yana Dagrua. Chisan Paksam Shin said the Dilia Gidin, Jebu da Medoda, Zoe Medipen, Gala Gandhi, but Chasan, Karekuin, Chasan, Delba Shin Delia Jungores, the nation Jures, Chisan the Chushin da Paksam Shin Yiche, the Bini the Shin the Tinge.
Before we go through each line, let's just compare some different kinds of trees. So the one being referred to, it's not in the verse, but this wish-fulfilling tree, then this is something that once planted, it continues to bear fruit and flowers inexhaustibly, unceasingly, without any care needing to be taken. Whereas, let's say we could take a regular fruit tree, like a mango tree. This, to some extent, is similar. You plant the tree, and each year it will continue to bear fruit without too much care. Whereas a banana tree, this is quite a different story.
개와 신군 출신 신도니스데 개와 신세데 가르스는 장주 셈기 메신비게 장주 셈기 군들랑 마인비게 개와 디게서다. 당연히 개와 신 가르여서는 아주 장주 셈기 메신비 개와 가르여서는 개와 딜이야 아는 디게 두에 동안 개죠. 개와 디잠기 대화를 미시 디게 두에 개와 사야지여와 제개와 치말 하다 미 고방 쌈 토백이 된다 쌈 다제 디잠기 안 개와 두에 용으로와 개와 용으로와 근데 나신 하나 라니 집어 심지어 탐지기 된다 제도서 말시다 라니 집 코위 동안에 저고 셈비게 군원 뒤에 토네 근데 개와 줍시 개와 뒤에 지산디 제소 개와 뒤에 전주 심기 말씀비 개와와 내서 추신 나시래 개라신 나시래 추신 나시래 시래 나 추신 신도 니세디래 추신 신도니 인비 김장 가서 제보기에 세버 교원이 있어 제산 추신디 제보치기 살전에 살직기에서는 되는 야기게 애민도 와서라 니나신 안에 세딜이야 디기 쌈 두에게 군롱기 지군이라지 개와 두에디 안에 세디기 디기 지코나 디기 줍서나 제우디 민차래다 개와 치말 하다미 고바 토에게 제부 미야요 말했어 민말 두고 말했어 디나신 개와 치말 하다미 고바 토고도섬 디잠 기군에란시 안지 개와 사바는 디 개와 치말 하다미 고바 제부 톱사네 디네 딜레야 토야요 말 제부 다가라 민차래서 고조사래서 고세사래서 디나신 탈바잠 토고도섬 비군에란시 탈베 고바 톱나 딘 조사래서 제부 민차래다 디네야 야야 산지고 제주심 고바 토야다 산지 고바 토야 규체고 말했어 제는 디니지 지네 제부기네 세버교와 니스 제도고래서 코로나족에다 탈도디 주변도 그런 게 개와디기 미유 줍차래된 되는 바 양결이야 제부터야길래 몇시 땅도 그거 말해야지래 너나지 순고래.
Looking at the first two lines, all other virtues, just like a banana tree, simply perish upon bearing fruit. All other virtues, then, this refers to virtues of any kind that are not conjoined with bodhicitta. So I mentioned before, the motivating intentions, breaking it down in 4 different levels. So this refers to the first 3. So if one engages in an activity to achieve happiness or to overcome problems in this life, that's as much strength behind that karmic seed that one creates, that the result will just be exhausted in that way. Or if one engages in a virtuous activity to attain a good rebirth, once that good rebirth has been attained, then that karmic seed which led to the good rebirth is exhausted. Nothing further can come from it. Or if one has the motivation to achieve liberation from samsara in its entirety, but just for oneself, when one does achieve liberation, all those karmic seeds that one accumulated, all those virtuous activities that one accumulated, motivated to achieve your own liberation, those now will be spent. They will be exhausted. So those virtuous activities that are motivated for any of those 3 goals, happiness in this life, or a good rebirth, or liberation, is what's meant by all other virtues. And just like a banana tree, simply perish upon bearing fruit. So when a banana tree or a plantain tree, when its fruit is born, then that tree is exhausted. It's to usually be cleared away so that a new one then has to grow in its entirety. But no further fruit can be born from that tree. Its potential is exhausted. So this then, all virtue that's created through a motivation that's devoid of bodhicitta, that is likened to a banana tree, in that once the result is attained, the potential, the energy of that virtue is exhausted.
다 장주 셈기 전신 내 따바래양 디부 진바 미지 별로 교루서야디 당한 저기 바삼이신 세디 다 그디 이내 내 디부디 파지지네 안 좋아해 봐. 안 디부 그디나 롱죄 여버 기도 봐 나신 장주 셈세디 내 디부들이야. 안 저기 저기 디송도 장주 셈기 전신 다 바삼신나 자와 딱바래 양스도 그디 이내서 딱바래 유매체 봐. 다고 유미 제바 대부 진배에서 바삼이 신디기 대부 유미 제바 좋아하면 봐 만들어야 진바 나신다 가소래 진바나 디브 대고래 용고래 디나지 장슈 셈 공바이나 장슈 셈기 니기 제부 될야 안징한 주기 뒤다 남바 군도 니기 제부 좋아하면 봐 그래서 팬비 제부디 좋아하면 봐디 용고래서 미세바 기위 자와디요 지마게바나 사도 게바나 권에 공도 펴와제바데 용거래 공편에는 탈도 남긴 계획고 봐둬야지 용토고래 해제래 바삼신 전전이 바삼신 니가 가서 제부 진바 교수세 제부 진비 미세베 별로 교수세데 장주세 바섬신 나신 하는 뒤다도 자주sem디게 제부디 내가다 탈도다 탈도 탐지kim요고 한 제부디게 가서 제부 용거래 두고래 제래.
The last two lines of the verse. The fruit tree of bodhicitta will, however, forever flourish, bearing fruit inexhaustibly. So the fruit tree of bodhicitta, which is likened to the wish-fulfilling tree, that I just checked now, it's the same, it's wish-fulfilling tree is the term used in our Lama Chopa Puja. So the fruit tree of bodhicitta is likened to the wish-fulfilling tree, in that it continuously produces fruit. In other words, the causes that are accumulated, that are conjoined, those virtuous intentions that are conjoined with the mind of enlightenment, with bodhicitta, they will continuously produce results. They will produce results of happiness in this life. They will lead to good rebirths in future lives. They will lead to the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds, in other words, liberation. And those same imprints will continue to have strength until enlightenment itself is achieved. And in this way, those same imprints will continue to flourish, bearing fruit inexhaustibly.
Letting on the corner sing of Shesaro, some that it did to me, Casso Dil, Shetan Devon. The native person which you watch in the yam, to say the Gole, the Sumsasum delirious. She's not Jevo, the enemy or the Sumsasum had the Yukonas, Bejitan God, actually. Then I didn't Laman the Giddy, Anzu Sajikan like you, Anzu Sing Jevo can to launch a show, Madison, and two Yagoras didn't 2 years. Tingone inventating got look euro the doom road because of the nature of Madame.
Well, the legend behind the wish-fulfilling tree, which maybe is true, maybe it's just a legend, who knows, is that it's a celestial tree which finds its roots and trunk within the realms of the demigods. But its fruits are largely, almost entirely born and the branches up in the god realms. So the demigods, they experience, again, very few fruits from the tree, although the trunk and roots are in their realm. But all the fruits are born or granted to those in the god realms, the higher realms. So the demigods are incredibly jealous. They're saying the tree is grown here, but the fruits we can't enjoy. Others get the fruits. So we can imagine, if you think of, as we're comparing fruit trees and banana trees, we can say maybe like a coconut tree, where you have this long trunk, and then the coconuts are only born right at the top. So the top there is where all the gods would, they've always got coconuts. And the demigods who are in the realms below look up with envy and thinking, this is so unfair. And then they engage in warfare with the gods, desperately trying to get the fruit which they feel is justifiably theirs. So whether this is true or not, I don't know. But that is the legend. Maybe it's true, maybe not.
Dine zadang anzuki dana nyingbo dela deshi shubha najin chisan chanshu semdi kumbha ina chanshu semdi ki 심지어 탐지 산조 고방 토벌 시기 세배 삼로디 데니 좀 많이 지게 여바나 데니 삼로디 휴긴 디기다 제부 미세바 잉그레사디 세디이네 디기 두고레스 개와치만 하다미 고파데 디기 톱투고레스 레다 녀모바 바 사보나 제바 빵바디야 디기 kiến 빵투고레스 지단디 녀모바 바샤네 제바 빵베 빵바 토비에 산조 고방 토바데 전주 셈델레 된 톱투고레스 소수가 랑라 삼나 당게네 데니 흉고레스 디마제다 데니 공바네 전주 셈 공바디네 옌레야 파도 세델레네 안실레야 판바주 투고레스 개와 치마이네 셴바 판바주 투고레스 안네 산지 타바 산지 고바톰네데 데 닌지 뒤다 답 넘버고도 셈젤레 판바주 투게 최고래 디차다 차디 전주 셈네 된 흉고레 제가 전주 셈디 제부 안데 지기 미세 바도 메바 용야 세대다 네 세디기 내갑다 타도 개와치마 세대다 개와치마 탈벽 고방 안데니 산지 고방 토야 제부 바도 메바 그래서 차상의 규디 차상 전주sem레는 두고래 차상 전주sem디 미제바 표하게 제가 봐도 뭐 양의 규디게 충충진의 첨보야 뭐 관계고도 표하게 되니게 제두고래 이제 되니자 전주sem디 공부이나 편연되는 시어래 제가 진짜 전주sem sem자 탐지기도 산조고바 토벌지기 sem배 섬로 전주sem디 공부고래서 공부이나 전주sem디를 뉴버되는 시연대 요래서 이제 전주sem 연대 송고로 니베 전주 셈기 니베데 조야가요 마 전주 셈기 전주 셈 곰베게 제부데다 고 미세바레 페 마중아디기 야철철다 니 전부 차스나 조야기네요 말라요 봐다 마도 봐도 편도지도 편도기.
The essence of this verse then is, when whatever virtuous activity is engaged in with a motivation conjoined with uncontrived bodhicitta, then the results of that virtue will be inexhaustible. In that, the virtuous results will be experienced in this life. They'll be experienced as good rebirths in future lives. They'll be experiences leading to one's liberation from suffering in its entirety. It will be experienced also as one's own attainment of enlightenment. But because the strength of that virtue that is conjoined with uncontrived bodhicitta is inexhaustible, that strength will never dissipate even when enlightenment is achieved, because the goal of the bodhisattva is to continue and guide each and every being to achieve their own enlightenment. And in this way, the virtue that they accumulate will continue to have strength and grow or flourish as the bodhisattva develops, and eventually even as a Buddha, as more and more beings are guided to their own enlightenment.
아주 심전실이야 칼라 뒤식 때문에 칼라 뒤식 때문에 내 군노리야 아주게 내 기대 조도 거래 심전 그 조도 거다 이거 저한테 지 콜로 판나 심제 제 용구래 야 지게 판나 삼마사제 야 지 칼라 제디 갑래야 소소 지야 나오지 모르지 삼단에 제 용구로와 아니야 지금 나 저기 베지 라마 베지민데 콜제 샤왔으면 되네 제 용구로와 다 가지를 군론라 콜로 판나선 베게 삼다 직제지 군론 용구래 야 되네게 삼로토네 한께와치마 땅에 되네게 콜이야 칼라이제제 디기 제부디 깨와치마리아 한알리아 제부지 미야기도 하나 삼다지 제바 용구래 안 되네게 안직 다 되네게 삼다도 다 semjan 탐지기도 나 산조 코바토베 치르도 전유심 유군내라지 제바 용구래 디네 제딜레시에 감직 사상 직파 제베이나 군로라 제게 세디 망인 개발요 말 제설 개발요 말 이네 군롱의 개발이 토네 제게 개와디 치중슈심을 저거래 전유심 유군내라지 세 직진베이나 디 진비게 제부디 진비게 수남디다 산조 고방토 규체고래 지난 니기 제부디 안서 산조 고방 마토 바도 리 산조 고방 톱사나에 세바메데 지리야지 다 군론 개와치마 소소리아 지게 론조 영향에 주 디삼 삼다 때문에 니기 데부디 개와치마 론조 중된 조사르와 니 멤버 개 다가라 세딜이야 소소야 지게 판연 콜이야 판도 가면서 다 나와기 위해 때문에 니 데부 지 용결돼 있나 좀 맞도 매야와 제산디 꿀롱기 곧 짐업 제들이야 최종당 망용 매나양 삼로 꿀롱의 토네 안에 잡을 수 있지 뭐 예제래
To give a very simple illustration that is probably relevant to most of you. Many people here have pets at home that you care for with genuine love and affection, and part of caring for them will be feeding them every day. Sometimes you'll feed them with great joy, wanting them to eat perhaps a special treat and something that you know they will delight in. Other times you'll just mindlessly put down the food for them because it's morning or it's evening and they need to eat. So you'll have different motivation and different results will come. From the side of the pet, they're still eating and are happy. From your side, maybe some joy will arise, or if you're not really very mindful, you won't even be aware of the pleasure they're taking in the food. So, in the same way there that you can, in our ordinary life, or ordinary people, will be able to offer food to a hungry animal and satiate their need, or they will just be mindlessly putting some food down, or maybe they have a very different motivation of, well, my dog eats most things, so it's like a garbage disposal. And then instead of putting it in the bin, I'll get rid of it in this way. So one can have very ordinary motivation like that. Such a motivation will lead to a far smaller result than if one has a motivation of, say, bodhicitta. If one has a motivation of bodhicitta, one will be very intentionally feeding your pet. But one will do so with a recognition that this animal before you is suffering, and this animal before you is in need. But this animal alone isn't the only suffering being. In fact, samsara is filled with suffering beings. And in the same way that now I am easing this being's suffering, may I, through this act of generosity, through the virtue I'm creating, may I ease all beings from suffering. And may I not just ease them from temporary suffering like this, but may I be able to guide all of them to attain their own enlightenment and thereby attain lasting, stable happiness. And here then, one makes the offering with this genuine motivation. It's a very different mind. The act is exactly the same. Your pet experiences the same food, but the quality of the cause virtuous cause you have created is vastly different. And that is not because of the act, but because of the quality of the mind that you have cultivated through reflecting on these topics again and again. And one can imagine then, from this different quality of mind making that same act, the strength behind the virtuous cause that you have created, or the virtuous imprint, will be so much stronger and will continue building over lifetimes, flourishing and bearing its fruit inexhaustibly. Whereas the way one normally feeds one's animals, often quite mindlessly, it's done, it's another task, and on we move, one can recognize that whilst it's a virtuous thing to feed those who are hungry, the potency or the strength behind that virtuous imprint created is much, much weaker and will very quickly be exhausted. So this then is an illustration that hopefully makes it clear how the motivating intention makes a vast difference to the quality of the virtuous imprint.
janju semgi sembi ge gune lang che gyawa saba ina chisa di chutikpa di gyawa di chutikpa ro she chisa di gyaso nang lu je janju semgi semba ina gyaso nang lu ba na she semja tham che sanjo go ba ma tho yu ba do ne chi gewe za wa di kin nu ba de a chi ko 라고래 제가 되게 라고래 제가 추티바지 개선한 로바도 직발해서 전주심이 있습니다. 제가 저 개화지네 탐마들이야 개왕오와제 심지어 탐지기도도 아니 오와제 산조고마도 교와 쇼서 오와제디 니리 제가 오와제를 개화사베 개왕오와디 심지어 탐지 산조고마도 교와 오와제디 제자디 아니 지게 추티바지 개선한 로바도 직발하시네 최고로 제자디 오와제와도 김사로지 니리.
There's another very famous illustration given by the Buddha that is appropriate here. If we think of just a simple drop of water falling, perhaps on a stone, it will very quickly evaporate and be gone. But the same drop of water falling into an ocean, it will dissipate within the ocean, but continue to have its potency abide, mixing in with the energy of the ocean. So Bodhisattva, when they create virtue, each virtuous act, even the small ones, because that motivation is infused with bodhicitta, it goes into that merit, goes into the great ocean of virtue that will abide until all sentient beings attain enlightenment. And the reason that each drop mixes with others, making this great ocean, is because of the power of that motivating mind of bodhicitta. Especially here we're talking about uncontrived bodhicitta. So when we dedicate, as we do after this class and after virtuous actions, the prayers we recite, they usually include the dedication of this merit to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And thereby, this virtue goes into the great ocean of virtue that is inexhaustible. It will always have energy pushing or leading beings to attain their own enlightenment.
로바체네 미치기래 교란치도 인생 미칠 때는 미치기 라사로 hod지마도요마 다 민망고지기 된다라 형도 차상을 디인랍나 권 차상을 하고 그러와 제자디 차상을 배라도 야침을 차고 그래 제가 샘전 탐지기 된다래서 개와사도 샘전 우리 교란도 차상을 인스티드 권 차상을 하고 그러와 디나징이 개와사기 디 샘전 탐지기 된도 인스티드 니기 제보디 마음반에 샘전 탐지 동아세기 인스네 대롱어 미 델믹제네 지금 심지어 탐지기 된도 심지어 탐지 동안 세야 된 산지고마 토비치도 인생백에 군로 데니시케제 개와사에도 믹서디 심지어 탐지를 미바 대양 심지어 탐지 산지고마 토비치도 미바 인자 니기 제부디 심지어 탐지 산지고마 마토이바도 네 제부 용거바디 세월 책으로 우리 지금 고마지 동다지 제베 미치gle 교란을 제베네 그 미치를 마더라고요 말봐 미동도지 미소 처지를 경험도 차상을 인생 때문에 차상을 베지도 아니라고 그러와 땅고라 이 차상을 베지마다 봐도 그 책마로 디나싱아도 개와서 샘전 탐지기도 랑이 지구 인삼다는 랑직마다 베지도 아니에요 샘전 탐지 대한 샘전 탐지 산지 고바 토비치도 인삼바 마토기 토비치도 인생 비게 개와 두면도 군로 데네스키네 구두가서 군로라 샘전 탐지 산지오 고방 토비치 델믹바 인자 디 제보다 산지 탐지 심자대자 산지오 고방 토발로 고고와 제가 제보 디루고와 제가 데네자 전주심이 심비게와딜레 야침보레서 제보 판도 침보레 뉴베 침보레서도 김제디로와다.
Similarly, if you have some money and you're going to offer it to someone, let's say you give someone $1,000, then that person's very happy, they've got their $1,000 from you, and they will put that to use for themselves. But if you take that same money and you offer it to the community, so perhaps you purchase something that will be for the benefit of the community, then that same offering will now bring far wider benefit. So similarly here, when you cultivate virtue, if you dedicate it to the broadest, most expansive goal, that virtue will continue to have energy, having an impact until the final purpose is fulfilled. So when one dedicates a virtue to the enlightenment for each and every sentient being, that goes into this great pool of virtue that's likened here to an ocean, which continues to empower virtue in the world until all beings attain enlightenment.
sem dele janju simgi panyan keju dine yore sibe dang an zuge janju simgi keju da panjun shira hago tugo marwa dine za gesi jiwala chimbege keju dudu so yore sungde da du sene samdang de dine ge janju simdi keju dine du chizan janju simdi dang an zule dine ge yonza jingma gene tabmene ge hudu simbege samlo chi kore ngan zu janju simgi ge dumba di nuba cher dumba yaya dal sungore 진데네 듬바 예견절에 듬바 야 누바 쳐다야다 고마절 누바 쳐다야 다게 된다 순고르바 내는자 다도나라 셈제 탐제교도나 산요고바 토벌 지긴 세베 삼로디 당한 주기 지게 두신에 마지 마게바디기 바기에지네 야네 양도 공부를 해서 데네고 검제 가zam질이야 죽고 셈제 탐 산요고바 토벌 쇼 셈베기 토벌 지긴 세베 전주sem데 소수규래 제마 많이 버게 봐야나 되는 게디 있나 셈자 담을야 지 가르치는 셈쟁이 된다래 인생비 삼로 남사 되네게 지게 이 개와 가르치는 게 셈쟁이 된다 이 셈쟁이 된다 신기 된다 인생비 삼로 다야 디토네래 연구를 받아 지산 좀 많이 뵙게나 되네게 삼로도 게디나 요요 봐 인자 아니 내가 가래 제베네 신의 팬비치도 신이 동화세요 신이 추도야 선배 삼로장야 리디고 받아 되네 인자다 개와도 게디네 신이 추도 신의 치도 선배 삼당야도 신의 네베 삼바다 체외 삼바다도 영야 제 컨트롤세다 되네게 체외 삼바도 균형에 연구 말로 봐 되네 매도다 그 강한줄에 체딜 삼다베는 아주 강한 가르치고선 컨트롤사네 마기와차 밀리아 투보셔 강하게 되샤요 돈은 지디 돈은 샬리아 차바제 네버게 되니까 되샤 콘도 나야 되네게 아니지게 차도 되네게 삼로서는 아주 마기버야 돼 삼로 되네 되는 용거로 봐 제자디 장주스미 현이 돈다 인스미 현에 팬베치도 인스 내가 그때는 디게에 제도 콘도 기가 말에 샬리아 체외 삼바 기가 말에 차도 기가 말에 마기도 랑기위 셈비기 바로와 대사디 에네 샬리에 팽거래 지사 라신이게래 팽바 내가 비네 데네 타도 산조고 봐 도비 규 두고 봐다 데네게다 데네자 전주sem비 팽디게 아주 야네 야도 삼다제 전주sem비 아주 규 예게 아주 샤사도 쳔네 베지 지키 제고야게 된다 송고로와다 데네 인사 제시와라 침비 송아지게 응네라네 만절이야 두제용 송바레 셈비게다 tukzewa jambadan zewa se tukzewa sigurwa zewa tukze wong sombares ze wong sombare jesa nan ju dunga se de tigi tuye se dona sungore denza bema se kedin chimbu yi koran du chene nyamlen chebare jesu ira cheda dine kesi wala chimangan songa de me se kedin chimangan zo hamo kwa de ngazo lobne lamde jade pe kedin chimbu shi sanbege andi nangan ju ine ta janju semdi 소수규라 강 토도 개바 제가 탑람냐 공기 선배당 중에 되네게 삼다제 능에 지금 아주 sem자 탐시 산유고 뭐 토벌쇼 선배 삼로딩 아주 야네 그 직다에게 당고에 되게 차상을 두시네 예치 뭐 책으로 봐
This 12th verse is the 7th verse thus far, where we've looked at benefits. We've looked at 7 benefits of bodhicitta in this chapter thus far, from verse 6 up to here. And again, the reason that Shantideva composed this text with the benefits of bodhicitta at the beginning and why we're going through them slowly, just 1 or 2 a week, is to give you the opportunity to, in your meditation every day, to reflect on these benefits of bodhicitta, how bodhicitta leads to destroying a great negativity, what we saw in the 6th verse, how it brings about supreme happiness, how it leads to the accomplishment of one's wishes, and so forth. So these varying benefits that we've seen thus far, because it's through reflecting on them again and again, the wish to achieve those benefits in your own mind will arise ever more strongly. And it's through this process of training your mind, making it more familiar with the benefits of bodhicitta, that will give rise to the initial wish, I want to become a bodhisattva. And the more one reflects on this wish will become ever stronger within oneself. When one has some familiarity with this desire to become a bodhisattva, has some familiarity with it on the meditation cushion, one will carry that into one's daily activities. And in quiet moments, recalling the benefits of bodhicitta, running through them like a list, but joined with the heart essence that was generated on the cushion. And in this way, slowly, ever more, as you go through your daily activities, this wish to be of benefit to others will dominate one's mind. And when one has given rise to uncontrived bodhicitta, then one is truly a transformed being, because everything that one will do is dominated by the wish, I must become a Buddha for the sake of others. And therefore the way of engaging with others will be remarkably different. For ourselves, we're very far from there. But to the extent we give rise to this determination, we will start to act, but with sincerity in our heart, ever more like a bodhisattva. Or to express that differently, engage with others ever more like a bodhisattva. And by that I mean, when a bodhisattva engages with others, they will only have an attitude of love and compassion and wisdom. That is all. There will be no possibility of harmful intent arising, of any anger or self-interest arising. Their interactions with whomever they meet, whether it's a dear friend, someone they only know from a distance, or a complete stranger in this life, they'll feel a warmth and a tenderness towards them, as if they were their own dear child. And they'll interact with them in that way. So for ourselves, as we develop this mind of bodhicitta ever more, we will see that anger and a self-centered attitude, as well as pride and jealousy, these minds start to weaken in their strength, weaken in their frequency with which they arise. And it's these minds that cause us so much pain now. When our mind is unhappy, it's usually just because we have a self-centered attitude. We think about myself and my problems. Or it may be something stronger like anger or pride or jealousy. But this is what makes us unhappy and leads to us interacting with others in a way that brings ever more unhappiness into their lives. But to the extent that we develop bodhicitta, our mind will become ever more peaceful. Our determination to benefit others will become ever more stable and dominant. And our interactions with others will lead to bringing ever more happiness into their lives. So this is, I say all this now to encourage you in your meditations to reflect on these benefits that we've covered on bodhicitta. And starting out, and before starting on the recollection of the benefits, recall that the only reason we could meet this text is because of that great being Shantideva, who transformed his own mind in the same way that he's laid out here, and then presented this text to others as an oral teaching. And he did so under the power of his own love and compassion. And through that incredible illustration, so many other beings have given rise to the same realizations that he has. And this entire lineage of incredible beings from the Buddha through ancient India, Tibet, and to our present-day teachers, has kept this tradition alive in their hearts. And here we rejoice in all the hardships and endeavors they endured, and we rejoice at our great fortune at having an opportunity that we can live this life in a truly meaningful way, making the most of this opportunity. So that's the way to start the meditation and then meditate on the benefits. To do this repeatedly over a sustained period will bring about transformation. And it's important to do so. And in this way, you'll experience a life of great meaning. Okay, so thank you. That's our time for this week. Thank you all very, very much.